Good morning and welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm Joe Taylor. This morning, another in the ongoing series of programs presented by the Northwest Regional Key Program for Quality Early Learning. The program, through the Northwest Institute of Research, oversees a grant from the Office of Child Development and Early Learning at the Pennsylvania Department of Public Welfare and the Department of Education. The goal of the program is to improve the outcomes for young children as they prepare for school. John Posa is a community partner specialist for the program, and he's here with us throughout the series. John, who do we have on the program this morning?
Well, thanks, Joe. I wanted to wish you all a happy holiday, and we have Kurt Kondrich. Kurt is he's on the Governor's Council. He's actually chair of the Governor's Council for Early Intervention. And welcome, Kurt. We really appreciate you being on the program today.
Thank you for having me and for allowing me to share my story and my experiences with early intervention in Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Kurt. You know, Kurt, we really wanted to make a point to have you on, especially this day, which is the day after Christmas. And there's such a rich story that you're going to share with us. But before we go into more of the specifics, tell us about your background and how you got into, I know you're one of the state's leading advocates for early intervention and how important it is in shaping the lives of special needs children. So tell us about how you got involved.
Sure, absolutely. I went to IUP. I've got a degree in criminology back in 1985, and I spent the first couple decades of my life as a police officer. I was a city police officer in Atlanta, Georgia. And then I was down in Florida, and I migrated back home to the Pittsburgh area, and I was a city of Pittsburgh police officer, enjoyed my job, was pretty set in what I was going to do. And then in 2003, my daughter Chloe was born, and she was born with a diagnosis of Down syndrome here in Pittsburgh. And during that time, you know, it was a lot of people were telling us what the things that she couldn't do and restrictions, and it was kind of a negative reception we received. So then we connected into these early intervention services here in Pennsylvania, and it really just had an incredible impact in the lives of not just my daughter Chloe, and my son Nolan, but our whole family. And that's really what kind of rocked my world and shifted me to my focus on pursuing a career in early intervention. So I spent, almost the first 20 years of my career as a police officer, and then there were other plans that were there for me, and that's what got me into early intervention was the birth of Chloe in 2003.
Now, I know you currently serve as the Director of Family and Community Outreach at Early Intervention Specialists and also on several boards. But take us back now and tell us how, when you decided to make early intervention your life's work, especially in terms of how the early intervention has impacted your own family and Chloe. Tell the story about how Chloe has blossomed. I know that she's now in the 6th grade, but share a little bit about how part of her story.
Absolutely. And kind of revisit history. You think, 40 years ago, which is recent history, a child that was born with a diagnosis of Down syndrome were basically classified as uneducable. Most of them were sent to an institution. Some of the words that were used back then are extremely offensive. You think of a word like mongoloid. They were these types of children, like my daughter, were viewed as that nothing could be done with them. And then, thankfully through the wisdom of educators and other people, professionals, we realize that these children have many, I always say they have many abilities. So when we connect with early intervention services after Chloe's birth, it was very early on. Like I said, the therapists would come to our house and they would focus on her abilities and all the things that she could do, and on her physical therapy, her cognitive therapy, and working with her speech and her language. And it was just amazing. When after her birth, we were in this kind of like a valley. We weren't sure where we were going to go, what things were going to happen, what were the possibilities for the future, what did that hold, and this was really, I would say, was the light in the darkness that led us out. And Chloe did excellent. We received in-home early intervention services, birth to 3, with the therapists and professionals coming to our house. And at age 3, I'll just share that Chloe was already reading at age 3. She was already, my son had a lot to do with it. My son Nolan, who was 4 when Chloe was born, but she was doing incredibly well enough that so at age 3 she entered a early intervention preschool program in the city of Pittsburgh. It was an inclusive preschool where she was with kids with differing abilities and also as typical kids, and she really she blossomed there. She did extremely well with her peers, with following directions, with learning, with reading, with all the neat things that happen in an early childhood education environment. And so when Chloe turned 5, she was actually ready to enter her neighborhood kindergarten with typical peers. And since that time, she's blossomed. She's advanced. She's 11 years old. She's in 6th grade at her neighborhood middle school. She's actually reading at grade level. She reads better than some of the policemen I used to work with. She's an amazing little girl. She plays baseball. She's involved in the community. She's done her own advocacy, and she's, like I said, she's shown that how important I always say it is to invest in children when they're young, because that investment always yields a positive return. And I remind people, and I remind families and community members and legislators, that 85% of a child's brain development is occurring in those first 5 years of life. And if you're able to get in there with really high quality early intervention services and supports and other things with these awesome professionals, that investment in those first 5 years, this is what it's leading to. Like I said, my daughter's in her neighborhood middle school. She doesn't get bused somewhere. She's not getting in a special school. So that in and of itself has saved hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of her education, and it is directly tied back to the services and support she received from early intervention. It's also, John, it's what drove me as a police officer after Chloe's birth. I started seeing this and realizing this, and I actually kind of took a leap of faith. I went back to school, went to the University of Pittsburgh, received a master's degree in early intervention, and that's what propelled me into my current field, where I work for early intervention specialists and also, like I said, chair the Governor's Advisory Council for Early Intervention, and have made it my mission to make sure that these supports and services are funded, are respected, are looked upon as a critical part of our state of Pennsylvania. So.
If we can we go back to before Chloe was born? Were you and your wife aware through prenatal testing that she was likely to have Down syndrome? And if so, what was that like emotionally? And what was your thought process in, forgive me, in terms of deciding to go ahead with the birth? I know
Absolutely.
people have a critical decision to make, yeah.
That's a great question, Joe. My wife was 40. I was 40 at the time that my wife was pregnant with Chloe, and we were kind of pressured into having prenatal tests, and they brought up the thing that we were at high risk for Down syndrome. Now, we didn't have any prenatal testing. We were very strong in our faith and our belief in the gift of life, and so we didn't have any. And but they kept pressuring us, and the thing that struck me during that time period is we were not given any positive supportive information that would said, hey, listen, if you do have a child with Down syndrome, we want you to know that there is early intervention, there is full inclusion, there's all kind of things these kids can do. Nobody focused on that. It was very negative. And I dialogue with families across Pennsylvania, actually across the country, and I hear the same stories all the time, that the families that do receive the prenatal Down syndrome diagnosis are not told anything good. They're told very negative, almost encouraged to terminate this child based on the fact that they're viewed as, defective or not worthy to be here. So I could speak later, but that kind of spawned me in to do some education legislation here in Pennsylvania that will ensure that families are aware of all the positive things. Like I said, I tell people all the time, I said, my daughter doesn't have disabilities. She has many abilities. She has an extra chromosome, but she's a very valued, important member of the community, of this school, and she has taught people a lot of really important lessons about life and about focusing on, what people can do, not what they can't do. So.
And speaking of legislation, I'm not going to let it slip, because you've
Yes,
obviously been vital in helping to draft what's called Chloe's Law, working with Harrisburg legislators, and for the very reasons of what you illustrated, in ensure that it's actually the Down Syndrome Prenatal Education Act, and share a little bit about what that legislation is all about.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Like I said, as I mentioned earlier, when I dialogue with families across Pennsylvania, and actually, like I said, I go to conferences in Washington, D.C. and dialogue with families all across the United States, not one person told me a story that where they received a prenatal diagnosis that they were told about early intervention, and told about all the positive things these kids can do. So I just thought, well, that's not acceptable. I mean, we live in a culture of facts, and as a police officer, I like facts, I like truth, and I said, if you're not giving the truth out, then how's somebody going to make how can somebody make an informed decision about their child and the diagnosis if they're not given the truth? So it just was really grassroots. Myself and another gentleman, Mark Bradford, who works for the Lejeune Foundation, we just kind of started looking. There were 2 other states at the time that had similar legislation. We looked at it. We started drafting our own. During my trips up to Harrisburg, I started planting seeds with legislators, looking for sponsors and co-sponsors. Like I said, it's an education. It really is an early intervention education law, just to disseminate truth and facts out. And as I went through, because I developed so many good relationships with legislators, both sides of the aisle, Republican, Democrat, I focus on people, not by their party affiliation, but their focus on serving and supporting our children and families. And it took off quickly. I started this in the fall of 2013. I would say by January, February, I had already had a sponsor in the House and Senate, and I had probably half the House and half the Senate co-sponsoring this legislation, and it ended up being brought up for a full vote, and it was voted. It passed 50-0 in the Senate, which many people are aware it's very difficult to have something that's that bipartisan. And it passed 196-4 in the House, and the governor signed it in July of this year. And I would say the highlight of the whole thing for me was Chloe and her friend Alex, who also has Down syndrome. They live in the eastern part of the state, got to sit next to the governor, and they also signed the legislation. So, like I said, now it's people are going to hear all the good things these kids can do. And like I said, Chloe's my daughter. She's part of my DNA. She's a gift. She's taught me more about life and unconditional love, purity than anybody has. And she really brings an amazing amount of light and joy and goodness to her school, to her community, and to all people. And that's just why I'm crazy and a champion for early intervention and what it does for people and what it does for families.
It seems to me the most important aspect of Chloe's Law is that it gives pregnant women, I'm quoting directly, useful and accurate information on Down syndrome. What type of misinformation had been conveyed to women in the past, and what type of useful and accurate information is now being conveyed to women, and how is that being conveyed? I would take it through their doctors, I would imagine.
Right. It's for anybody that administers these prenatal tests. I mean, things I've heard within the last year from women prior to this legislation who received a prenatal Down syndrome diagnosis. I've heard words like defective, might do 3 simple steps, will be a burden on your family, will cause stress to siblings. I've had women tell me they were basically just told to terminate the pregnancy, to get rid of the child because that diagnosis was not compatible with the culture, with society. They were encouraged to eliminate the child based on the diagnosis. And I would, something I like to ask people too. I said, first of all, I'm a believer we're all disabled. We all have things that we excel at. We all have things that we need support and help with. But so what if they start developing a prenatal test for autism or all different types of things, and just based on that, they determine that these kids are not worthy to be here. Well, without giving the information out that, hey, listen, it's a different destination, but the destination is a good thing. And when this child does come into the world, we want you to know, hey, there is early intervention. There is an inclusive early childhood education. Hey, your school districts are capable now with awesome special ed teachers to have these kids fully included. It's just like I said, I'm a big believer in facts. The old dragnet, just the facts, man, that people have facts, and they were not getting that. And that's really the reason that I had to do this legislation, educational legislation, to make sure that people had facts and truth.
Aside from formal intervention, which you got for Chloe, what is different, do you think, in the way that you and your family raise her and relate to her as opposed to other parents with their Down syndrome children? Is there anything special that you guys are doing as a family?
I think sometimes we celebrate things a little more, when she passes benchmarks. You know, when Chloe was reading at such a young age, it was amazing when you think about it. Like I said, here's a child who not long ago would have been told she couldn't read. You know, we noticed that when Chloe was reading early, you know, she was having some problems. So we had an eye exam, and she wears really cool glasses. And I thought, well, years ago somebody would have assumed that a child with Down syndrome couldn't read at all, and wouldn't even had them checked for glasses. So I think we celebrate the little things in life a lot more. My son, who is a sophomore in his in Upper St. Clair High School, it's really made him a better man also. I tell people he has learned about patience and kindness and unconditional love and what real beauty is. And I'll just share with you the effect that Chloe's had on her brother. I mean, my son, who's a soon-to-be 16-year-old teenager, is already talking about becoming a special ed teacher when he gets older. So I think that's amazing too, that she's had that type of positive effect on him and a lot of people in the community. My son plays volleyball at the high school, and it's amazing how the volleyball players come up and talk to Chloe and kind of made her the official assistant manager and all the other things. It's neat to watch these seeds grow, and I think we appreciate that a little bit more, having a child like Chloe to watch those things happen. So.
Well, that is a great story. I was going to ask you about Nolan and the bond there between he and his sister. But, you know, the other thing that's so important, too, and of course, you knew early on the services that were available to you as a family. And that's so important regardless of where families live throughout the state. There are services available through early intervention and from preschool classrooms where either provided through the school district or from privately run. And you may want to touch on that a little bit to know that, you know, if there are families out there listening who are in that position and not sure where they should first go, you may want to address that.
And John, I would ask you too, are these resources available here in our area?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yes, they are.
Yes, through the Pennsylvania Keys, John, and other places. Pennsylvania, I would argue and also defend is an absolute national leader when it comes to early intervention, early childhood education. And as you mentioned, a lot of people aren't aware that they can connect with this. But every county in Pennsylvania, you know, we do have the Pennsylvania Keys, we do have the Pennsylvania Promise for Children. We have a lot of awesome people at the state level who make sure this information it gets out to families where they can connect and access these programs for their kids. And I'm a very big believer. My son Nolan went to preschool. I'm a big believer in preschool. You know, some people argue with, what's good that, and you know, I make sure I remind legislators when I'm over, you know, that 85 to 90% of brain development occurs in those first 5 years of life. You know, it really does put in a foundation. I always say that early intervention, early childhood education lay the foundation of hope and optimism for a successful life. They really do. And there's many children who would all children, in my opinion, would benefit greatly by being in a quality early childhood education program, because they're learning, they're growing, they're learning social, emotional, adaptive skills, and it really, really helps prepare them for when they do enter a school district to excel. And like I said, my daughter's just one of countless children across Pennsylvania, and as you mentioned, in all counties, all 67 counties who have used these programs. I can't say enough about the people the teachers, the early intervention therapists and that who have devoted their life to doing this, because, you know, it's not extremely high-paying job, and it requires a lot of time, and it requires a lot of adaptability. But they've made this commitment, you know. And I always say they're seed planters. The stuff that they're doing now, you know, long after they're gone, is going to be reaping a positive harvest across our state for generations. And I said, you know, our most precious resource here in Pennsylvania is our children. If we can't invest in them and invest in them early and ensure that they have that foundation for success, and we will never move forward and never succeed as a state. I truly believe that. So
for Chloe and for other children like her with early intervention, what is the long-term prognosis in terms of further education, employability, and ultimately self-sufficiency? And how has this, I would take it, improved, you know, with the advent of early intervention?
Well, like I said, I give that Chloe's success now in her school district. A lot of that success I give to early intervention. So she had that foundation. She's doing very well in school right now. She's developing social friends. I mean, so it's gonna help her not just, when she goes on to have a job someday, but also just her social skills and her being out like around public. She connects with people. She knows people in the community. She's very well known in the community. So people look out for her. They come up to her. They talk to her. They're very comfortable with her. She's just one of the kids because early on she was included in all these different programs and educational programs. So, Chloe's prognosis is great. People say, what's Chloe going to do when she grows up? I said, why don't you ask her? I said, I could see her working in an early childhood center, maybe as a reading assistant, maybe having her own advocacy firm. The sky's the limit for her. She's comfortable on a bus. She's a person I could see taking public transportation or, doing her own things, and she's very capable. She has many, like as I said, many abilities. She's a very helpful person, and that all goes back to, like I said, people respecting her. She's included. She's part of the community. She's part of the school, and the other students and kids see that. So, she plays baseball in her community. She's just like I said, the sky's the limit as far as what Chloe's future is going to hold. I'm very optimistic about it. I told the governor, I said she might run for office someday. Why not?
But first she has to have
what we need up at the Capitol. So.
But first she has to take her dad's job first, right?
Right. So
she's a natural, though.
I'm confident about that.
Yeah, she is a natural, and I know that she's known well in your community in the Pittsburgh area there, but she's known in a lot of communities throughout the state because she's gone with you so often on some of your advocacy trips, and so she is very well known and just is an excellent person to listen to.
One of the things I really enjoy too, you're right, we've traveled all over the state. We've been up in Elk County, we've been up in Bradford, out in the eastern part of the state, and I love when we get to meet with new parents who have children with Down syndrome, or we've met with expectant parents, and it's really neat when they meet with Chloe and she talks to them, and she has a book that she's in. She'll sign a book for them, give them a copy of it, and just talk about school and everything. You can just see the joy and the excitement in their face when they see, wow, this isn't so bad. This is there's a bright future, and I think we need a lot more of that in our culture. People who are able to share joy and hope and light with people, and she does it. She's like a messenger. She's empowered and uplifted a lot of parents who, like I said, who just had a child with Down syndrome or expecting one to see that. Listen, it's going to be pretty cool, pretty awesome future. And like I said, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't change a thing about Chloe. If there was something out there where they could, whatever somebody would say, change her down, I wouldn't do it, because it's part of her uniqueness. It's part of who she is as a person, and I would argue it's made her a better person, and those who have had contact with her better people.
And the last thing we want to ask this morning is, if a parent or grandparent listening is aware that a child is likely to be born with Down syndrome, what steps can they take, early intervention, whatever, to achieve the kind of results that you have with Chloe? What should they do? Because I imagine the first impulse is probably a bit of a shock. Once they get beyond that, what should they do?
In the state of Pennsylvania, I encourage people to immediately connect with whatever county they're in, with the early intervention director of that county, and they can start talking about the services that they're going to be able to have for their child once their child is born, and seeing, and those people are all awesome. Every county in Pennsylvania has really outstanding, uplifting, positive, supportive people in those positions. So if you're expecting a child with Down syndrome, to me, the first and most important thing is connecting with early intervention. It really is. It's the beginning of that journey that really starts, shining the light on the future. Because the other thing about early intervention, you only get that one shot of doing it. It's home base is birth to 3, then you do it in the preschool 3 to 5. And you don't get a second chance at that. So I really encourage parents, once they have their child here, to immediately start connecting with early intervention. Get involved. Most counties across Pennsylvania have Down syndrome support groups with some really awesome parents and leaders who will, connect you to resources and all kind of good things in the community that are happening. And so that's, to surround yourself with positive, uplifting, supportive people. And really, like I said, the key to that, we're in the Keystone State, so the key to that is really early intervention is the first thing to plug into.
And of course, this time of year, it's a perfect time. Everybody's in that good holiday spirit. So,
yeah.
Hey, that's that. Our time is up, Kurt, and I'll tell you, I really appreciate the time. and having you on as a guest on a very important subject, and wish you and your family the very best this holiday season.
And that's our program for today. We'll be back in 2 weeks at the same time. In the meantime, you can go online to learn more at papromiseforchildren.com. If you have questions, please email them to questions@nwirkey.org. For John Posa and the Northwest Regional Key Program for Quality Early Learning, I'm Joe Taylor. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.